Hello, George, Fat Ninja Food Forest. We don't go on a walk around or anything. I just want to make a short video about compost. We have the composting systems here. I watched the Alan Booker video this morning about bioremediation, about the steps we do, getting those good guys down right away from a good compost and a vermicompost, about a good compost, thermophilic and vermicompost mixed. About inoculating biochar and getting that down, wood chips, and then hydro seeding. Another things they're mentioning is we're trying to get everyone to compost, taking all of this, what I call the OM organic matter. We take all this organic matter, I leave a lot of it in place, but I also compost a lot of it. And keep this video short, show you the worm systems that I've used for years, our thermophilic, our static, and then our wormery. By showing the ones I use for years, it's a great way that any homeowner can take their kitchen scraps, their garden scraps, their farm scraps, and create a wonderful compost of vermicompost, kind of the black gold of compost. As Alan says in the video, we want both of them. There's different microorganisms in there. We're going to have the actinomycetes, I believe, is the correct ones, in the hotter environment, bacteria like that. So you're going to have different microorganisms in a thermophilic. It's gotten hot compared to a worm's belly as it runs through that. And we want as much diversity in there, excuse me, as much diversity as we can get. Losing my voice. As much diversity in there as we can get. Same with our yards. I'll get to talking though, so let's just go here and we'll look right here. Here's my oldest compost piles. This new one hasn't really gotten up to temperature since the Helene came. But you can see it's a good size, up almost 3 foot by 3 foot. So that's why I'm saying that is the potatoes have taken off in there. I wasn't able to get it wet enough when I made it. I didn't want to spray the city water on it, and I didn't have water around. But here's our old compost piles that I dig through every time. So I can use a combination of these. These have gone through that thermophilic stage. They've been turned at least 3 times, trying to get the inside above 142 degrees, up around 160, and holding it there for 3 to 5 days, turning it, making sure all 3 areas, top, bottom, and center, get to that temperature. After that, I let it set as long as possible. So that thermophilic is going to be heavy on the bacterial component. And as it sets, the hyphae that are in there and the fungal spores that are in there are allowed to grow. I'm still disturbing that when I pick it up and sift it, but then all that's going to be in, as we'll see, the worm bedding. I'm going to pause here. We'll go out front and look at some other compost. Over here's another thermophilic pile I have going. Again, compost can be as simple as doing a red wiggler bin like these, or building a thermophilic pile outside your house, along next to your house like we saw back there. One of the problems with a thermophilic pile is getting it up to temperature and holding it there. It's going to have to be at least 3 cubic feet, 3 foot tall, 3 foot wide, 3 foot wide. I use it by doing the chicken bedding every six weeks or so. Our food scraps have built up to enough. Our chicken and duck bedding and any yard organic matter, garden waste goes into it. I also have wood chip piles dropped off as often as possible. If I hear a chipper in the area, I'll go beg for the chips. If you're unable to get that accumulation, you can't get it up to temperature. The reason we want to do that is we want to break down all the weed seed that's in there and the pathogens for disease. So to do that, it has to get up above that 142 degrees Fahrenheit. You'd have to stay there for about 5-6 days. If we can get up closer to 160, it's going to become 3 days. And then we turn it, aerate it, make sure it's moist enough, and let it heat up again. Doing that 3 times, getting the center that hot, getting the center up to temperature, the top up to temperature next time we turn it, and the bottom the 3rd time we turn it. However you want to do it, but all 3 parts. From there, I feed it through the worms again. But that'll give us, you don't have to. That's a good thermophilic compost. And as long as you've gotten everything up to temperature, we'll look, there's an inexpensive compost thermometer. You've gotten everything up to temperature, it's a great compost to use. Again, it's a certain set of microbes that are in that. An easier way, I believe, for your home gardeners is a worm compost system. I used one of these bins for years. That's how I ended up with worms. Years and years ago, I bought some worms locally, some red wigglers. I use the red wigglers. They're a surface feeding worm, decomposing worm. And I use a double bin system like this. These are full right now, so it's hard to show you. Let me show you in a smaller one. Something like this could even go into your kitchen sink. You put your food scraps in here. You cover it up with a little carbon, whether it be leaves, wood chips, cardboard. Cover it back up. When you've done that enough that it's filled up half, 3/4 of the way, there's holes drilled all through these. At that point, you'll start feeding the top with your food scraps and covering it with carbon. When the worms run out of food in the bottom one, they're going to crawl through those holes, harvest themselves, and leave that compost available to use. You take that, you use that compost, and you restart your system. One like these gives you, these are about 30-gallon totes, so that gives you 15, 20 gallons of compost ready to go after you filled it up. From here, let's go look. That's a real simple way. So the worm compost or a simple thermophilic compost. Some things I do, I think, that helps our compost even be a little better is I've had wood chips dropped off here for years. Probably 10 years here in this area here until we put the fence up last year. So in that area, I just have a beautiful broken down wood chip, composted wood chip. Didn't necessarily get hot, but it still breaks down over time. So there are simple ways to do compost. We can do a static pile. I used to say it's real simple to leave it there, but if you really want to get a healthy, full of everybody we're looking for, and make sure nobody that we don't want is in there, we want to make sure we get it up to temperature and or run it through a worm's belly, in my opinion. Here, we're hanging out there about 129, 128 in this big pile here. I think 12 baskets gave me the compost for this, using with wood chips, bearing it. The chickens are out here every day digging through it, helping out. But that's what I do. I start with that. I've turned that 3 times now. Being so big, it can sit there and cool down. It's so large, I'll probably turn that again a few more times. As much energy as I have to do it. I'm sorry, the chickens. As much energy as I have to do it. They're molting. Oh, you're looking horrible, Cabango. I'm in a dirt bath. Again, you can see where those wood chips were. That gorgeous soil. I use this for worm bedding and to help my compost. I didn't mean to disrupt you. Let's go this way. So, again, thermophilic compost, static compost, which can be the lazy man's way, but make a good compost. The thermophilic compost, making sure we get 3 good turns in it, getting it up to temperature. Buying one of those inexpensive compost thermometers to do it. And checking it in multiple places. Again, I use as much yard waste as I can. We have lots of comfrey, wood chips on the ground, the leaves around here, diversity of annuals and perennials mixed in. Let it set static as long as possible, get that fungal component built back up in it. The wood chips really help that, and the leaves. From here, I'm just going to go in and show you our worm composting system now and how we do it and why we do it. Just go ahead and explain that and what I think the benefits of it are. Just a real pretty time of year. Everything's giving us the last little push. I'll pause here as we go through the mess back here. Still messing here. Don't tell Melinda brought us in. So this is my large compost for the worm compost where we harvest from. But to get that, we fill it full with these tubs are in here and get harvested once a week. What I'm doing there is the red wigglers have a 3-week harvest time on their cocoons when they lay them. So I'll reload a bed. What I do to reload it with is I use thermophilic compost. We saw that out there that sat as long as possible. I sift that. I mix that with a sifted wood chip that came from under the trees. We saw that. I use a combination of those two as bedding for the worms. I leave them in there for 3 weeks, just long enough for them to, in numbers, about 500-600 worms, and that square footage is just enough that they're not overpopulated and they really get busy laying cocoons. So one of these bins, one of these small bins here, holding 600 worms and leaving them alone for 3 weeks in there, just feeding them, giving them a little supplemental feed along with the compost, will lay up to 1,000 cocoons in that area. Each of those cocoons is going to have on average 4 worms. So they add up really quickly. But I don't want to injure those cocoons when I'm sifting them out of there and losing them all. So that's when I take the compost once a week, once every 3 weeks. It's once a week, but let's say that so it makes sense. Every row is every 3 weeks. So this row, this row, this row, repeat the process. I dump those into this large bin here. It's drying out right now. And I go from one end to the other with that, building it up to the floor. Once I reach one end, it's harvestable. I harvest all those castings. That takes about 2 months. I come back the other way. Been at this just over 6 months now with this large system. We're on our 3rd time. And it gives us these gorgeous castings. See the worms in there still. That's what I sell. You'll get worms. You'll get cocoons. I don't sift it down to a small size. I leave it moist so it's right full of that beneficial life. The drier it is, the more of those that shut down and hibernate. What else did I want to say about this? Go outside. It's quieter and it just looks better. Tufted titmouses are feeding on the raspberries here. So I guess let's just finish up with a summation of, hey, I have compost. If anyone needs it, worm compost. I'd love to get it out there and get it on the soil as soon as possible, just like Alan Booker said. Making these extracts and these teas. B, anybody can compost. You can thermophilic compost at your house. If you don't get enough organic material built up there, you can use a worm bin or a combination like we do here. Change is better than holiday is something I always say. But let's talk about this, the ways we can do this. Now we can help one another remediate all this damage we see around us. I was just watching that video. So many things. There's so many things that I've learned in doing this. I'm proud of myself, hey, on understanding all this and the food web and the biochar and the compost and the thermophilic compost and the worm compost. I'm not familiar with the hydro seeding yet. Let's help one another understand these things, remediate the area in the process. I like promoting the permaculture. This is a food forest. We're in a food forest here. We're on a ½ acre in the city as compared to next door. Grass lawns all around us. But we produce a tremendous amount of food here every year. Come on, we eat every day we want. For probably 8 months a year, I would say. I mean, there's still tomatoes hanging. We've had our minor first fraud. I'm digressing. Compost. We can all do this. Let's help one another. Let's start the conversation. Change better than a holiday. Peace. George, Fat Ninja Food Forest.